Chapters 15 through 21 of the Book of Genesis, from the Holy Bible in Modern English. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Mark Penfold. The Holy Bible in Modern English, translated by Ferrar Fenton. The Book of Genesis, chapters 15 through 21. Chapter 15. It was after these events that the ever-living spoke to Abram in a vision, saying, "Be not afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your abundant reward. I will greatly enrich you." But Abram replied, "Mighty God, why should you give to me when I go childless? And the possessor of my house will be Eliezer of Damascus." And Abram continued, "Look at me. You have not given me offspring, so that the steward of my house will become my heir." But the ever-living answered him, saying, "That man shall not be your heir, but one who shall owe his birth to yourself shall become your heir." Then he took him to the open, and said, "Look up at the sky and count the stars, if you are able to count them," telling him also, "Thus shall your race be." And Abram believed in the ever-living, and it was repaid to him in righteousness. He also said to him, "I am the ever-living who brought you from Ur of the Chaldees to give you this land as an inheritance." But he replied, "Mighty Lord, how am I to know that I shall inherit it?" Who answered him, "Select for me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle-dove, and a young pigeon." Taking all these, he split them in the middle, and placed each part opposite its neighbor, but he did not split the birds. Then the kites descended upon the carcasses, but Abram drove them away. And when the sun was sinking, a stupor fell upon Abram, and also a great and terrible darkness oppressed him. He then said to Abram, "Know this, and be assured that your race will be foreigners in a land not their own, and they shall enslave them and oppress them for 400 years. The nation which enslaves them, however, I will punish, and after that I will bring them out with great wealth. But you shall go to your forefathers in peace. You shall be buried with beautiful gray hairs. And in several generations they shall return here, when the sins of the Amorites will be complete." After the sunset, followed by thick darkness, a bright cloud appeared, a blazing fire which passed between the pieces. At the same time the ever-living made a covenant with Abram, saying, "I will give this country to your race, from the river of Egypt to the great river Euphrates, the Kenite, the Kenizzite, the Cadmonite, the Hittite, and the Perizzite, and the Rephaim, and the Amorite, and the Canaanite, and the Girgashite, and the Jebusite." Chapter 16. Sarai, Abram's wife, had given him no children, but she had an Egyptian maid named Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, "See now, the ever-living has kept me childless. Therefore go to my maid. Perhaps she will have a son for me." And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. Therefore Sarai, the wife of Abram, took Hagar the Egyptian maid at the end of the 10th year of Abram's residence in the land of Canaan, and gave her to Abram her husband as a wife. So he went to Hagar, and she conceived. When she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despicable in her eyes. Then Sarai said to Abram, "My wrong came from you. I gave my maid to you as wife, and she sees that she has conceived, and I am despicable in her eyes. Let the ever-living decide between me and you." Abram answered Sarai, "Well, your maid is under your hand. Do to her whatever you consider right." So Sarai persecuted her, and she fled from her presence. A messenger of the ever-living met her, however, at the well of waters in the desert, at the well by the road to the wall, and asked, "Hagar, servant of Sarai, where are you going, and what are you weeping for?" And she answered, "I am fleeing from the hand of Sarai, my mistress." But the messenger of the ever-living said, "Return to your mistress, and submit yourself to her." The ever-living's messenger further said to her, "I will greatly increase your race, so that they cannot be numbered for multitude." The ever-living's messenger also continued, You are now with child, and you will give birth to a son, and you must call his name Ishmael, for God heard your sorrow. And he shall be a free man, his hand shall be with every man, and the hand of every man with him, and he shall stand up in the presence of all his brothers." She accordingly called the name of the ever-living who spoke to her. "You are the God I saw. I can say this, for I have lived after he appeared to me." So the well was named the Well of the Vision of Life. It is situated between Kadesh and Bered. And Hagar gave birth to a son to Abram, and Abram called the name of his son by her Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar gave birth to Ishmael to Abram. Chapter 17. When Abram was 96 years old, the ever-living revealed again to Abram, and said to him, "I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be perfect. And I will make a covenant between myself and you, and I will increase you very, very greatly." Abram then fell on his face, and God spoke to him, saying, "I now make a covenant with you, and you shall be a father of many nations. So your name shall be Abraham. For you shall be the father of many nations. And I will make you very fruitful, and I will make nations and kingdoms proceed from you. I will also establish my covenant between myself and you, and with your descendants after you from generation to generation forever, to be a God to you and your race after you. I will also give to you and your race this country where you are a foreigner, the whole land of Canaan for a possession forever, and I will be their God." God also repeated to Abraham, "Now this is the covenant which you shall keep, as well as your race after you in their generations. This is the covenant which you shall keep between myself and you and your race after you. Circumcise every male of them. And they shall be circumcised in the foreskin of the body, for an attestation of the covenant between myself and them. And upon the 8th day every male shall be circumcised in their generations, whether born of the family or purchased for money, although he is not of your race. Whoever is the child of your own family, or bought for money, shall be circumcised. And it is my covenant in your body as an everlasting bond. But the degraded male who has not been circumcised shall then become separated from my people, because he has broken the covenant." God further said to Abraham, "Sarai your wife shall no more be called by the name of Sarai, for Sarah shall be her name. And I will bless her, and also give you a son from her, and she shall become the mother of nations, and of kings of peoples." Then Abraham fell upon his face, and laughed, and said in his heart, "When I am 100 years old? And will Sarah also, when 90 years of age, have children?" Then Abraham said to God, "I wish that Ishmael might live in your favor." And God replied, "Feeble Sarah, your wife, shall give you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. And I will fix my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his race after him. And for Ishmael I have also heard you. My blessing will be with him, and I will cause him to prosper and extend him very greatly. He shall beget 12 princes, and I will grant him to become a great nation. But that other is the covenant I will fix with Isaac, whom Sarah your wife will bear about this time next year." Then he ceased to converse with him, and the divine messenger went up from Abraham. Abraham accordingly took his son Ishmael, and all who were born in his family, and all bought with his money, every male of the people of the household of Abraham, and circumcised the foreskin of their bodies on that very day which God spoke to him. And Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised in the foreskin of the body. Ishmael also was 13 years of age when he was circumcised in the foreskin of his body. On the very same day Abraham and his son Ishmael were circumcised. All the men born in his house, or bought with his money, and foreigners, were circumcised with him. Chapter 18. The Lord again revealed to him at the oak woods of Mamre, when he sat at the door of his tent in the heat of the day. Then he raised his eyes and looked, and saw 3 men standing opposite to him, And he looked and called to them from the door of his tent, and bowing to the ground, said, My masters, if now I have found favor in your eyes, will you not come in to your servant? Take a little water and wash your feet, and rest under the wood, and take a bit of bread and refresh your heart, and afterwards proceed. Perhaps for this you passed near your servant? And they replied, Do as you have said. Abraham then hastened into his tent to Sarah, and said, Hasten with 3 measures of fine flour kneaded, and make cakes. Abraham also ran to the fold, and took a fine fat calf, and gave it to a youth, who at once dressed it. Then he took cheese and milk, and the calf which he had dressed, and placed before them. And he stood opposite them under the trees while they were eating. They afterwards asked him, Where is Sarah your wife? And he replied, She is in the tent. They then said, I will restore you as at the period of youth, and there shall come a son from Sarah your wife. And Sarah heard it at the door of the tent where she was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in years, and feeble. It was not with Sarah as women are. So Sarah laughed in her apartment, saying, After I am wasted, will there be pleasure for me, even when my master is old? The Lord consequently said to Abraham, Why did Sarah laugh, saying, Shall I suckle a child when I am old? Is it a great thing for the ever-living to say, At such a time I will return to you the period of youth, and give a son to Sarah? But Sarah denied, replying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. He, however, answered, Yes, you did laugh. The men then departed from there, and faced toward Sodom, and Abraham walked with them to converse. Then the Lord said, Shall I conceal from Abraham what I am about to do? When Abraham is to become a great and mighty nation, and every nation of the earth to be blessed through him? For I have instructed him in order that he may command his sons, and the sons of his house after him, that they must keep to the path of the ever-living, and do right and justice, so that the ever-living may cause to come upon Abraham what he has promised to him. So the Lord continued, Sodom and Gomorrah shriek, for their sins are many and are very grievous. I have therefore come down, and I will see what causes the shrieks that have come to me. Have they full cause? If not, I will know. So the men turned from there and went toward Sodom. But Abraham stood firm in the presence of the Lord. And Abraham approached and said, Will you destroy the just along with the wicked? If there are 50 just persons within the city, will you destroy it, and not raise your hand from the place because of the 50 just persons that are within it? Far be it from you to do as you have said, thus to kill the just with the wicked, and to make the just and the wicked alike. It is far from you. Will not the judge of the whole earth do justice? The Lord accordingly answered, If I find 50 just men in the whole city of Sodom, then I will for their sakes take off my hand from all the place. Then Abraham answered and said, See now, I began to speak to my Lord, although I am but dust and ashes. If there should want 5 just persons of the 50, will you sweep away the whole city for want of 5? And he answered, I will not sweep it away if I find there 45. But he continued still to speak to him, and said, If there are found 40 there? He replied, I will not do it for the sake of the 40. Still, he said, let not my Lord be angry now, and I will speak. If 30 are found there? And he answered, I will not do it if I find 30. He continued, however, See now, I will dare to speak to my Lord. If there are found 20 there? And he answered, I will not destroy it for the sake of the 20. He then said, Let not my Lord be angry now, and I will speak once more. If 10 are found there? And he replied, I will not destroy it for the sake of the 10. Then the Lord went to do what he had told to Abraham, and Abraham returned to his own place. Chapter 19. And 2 of the messengers came to Sodom at evening, when Lot was sitting at the gate of Sodom. And Lot saw and rose to invite them, and bowed his face to the ground, and said, See now, my good sirs, turn aside to the house of your servant, and rest yourselves, and wash your feet, and quench your thirst, and you can then proceed on your journey. But they replied, No, for we must go further. Then he pressed them much, so they turned with him and came to his house. And he made them a repast with unleavened cakes, and they partook of them. It was not yet time for sleep, when the men of the city, the men of Sodom, surrounded the house, from youths to old men, in fact all the people of the neighborhood, and called out to Lot and said to him, Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may ravish them. Lot, however, went out to them to the porch, and the doors were closed behind him. And he said, My friends, do not commit such wickedness. Look now, I have 2 virgin daughters. I will bring them to you, and you can do to them whatever you like. Only to these men do not such a thing, for as a protection from it, they came to the shelter of my roof. But they replied, Be off with that! This fellow came here a foreigner, and he dictates decisions. Now it shall be worse for you than for them. Then they rushed to the man Lot with a vengeance, and attempted to break the gates. But the men put out their hands, and brought Lot to themselves into the house, and closed the gates. And they struck the men in front of the house with blindness, from the youngest to the oldest, so that they could not find the doorway. Then the men said to Lot, Now, who is with you here, relative, or son or daughter, or any one that you have in this city? Let them go out from this place, for we shall destroy this place. For its great shriek has come before the ever-living, and the ever-living has sent us to destroy it. Lot therefore went out and spoke to his relatives, to the husbands of his daughters, and said, Come, let us go out from this place, for the ever-living will destroy the city. But he was considered a fool in the eyes of his relatives. So when dawn arrived, the messengers said to Lot, Get up, take your wife and your 2 daughters, and go out, for the crimes of this city are completed. But he hesitated. So the men seized hold of his hand, and the hand of his wife, and the hands of his 2 daughters, from the pity of the Lord towards him, and brought them out, and placed them outside the city. And when they had brought them out, they then said, Fly for your life! Look not behind you, and delay not in all the plain. Take flight to the mountains. Take yourself there. But Lot answered them, Oh, my lords, let now your servant find favor in your sight, and increase the kindness which you have done to me, to enliven my soul. For I am not able to escape to the hills before the disaster will overtake me, and I shall die. See now this city. It is easy to escape there. In a little time I can escape to there. Is it not a trifle? And my life will be preserved. So one replied to him, Yes, I will accept your presents. Also for this thing, I will not destroy this town on behalf of which you have spoken. Be quick to escape there, for I am not able to do the thing until you arrive there. He accordingly called the name of that place Zoar. The sun had risen above the land when Lot entered Zoar. The ever-living then rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah lightning and fire from the ever-living from the skies, and overwhelmed those towns, them and all the plain, and all the inhabitants of the towns, and the produce of the land. But his wife looked back, and was transformed into a pillar of salt. And when Abraham went in the morning to the place where he stood before the Lord, and looked out towards Sodom and Gomorrah, and towards all the land of the plain, he saw and perceived a stench and smoke rise up from the country, like the smoke from a furnace. Thus it was that God destroyed the cities of the plain. But God remembered Abraham, and sent Lot beyond the reach of the destruction with which he destroyed those towns where Lot lived. And Lot went up from Zoar, and settled in the hills along with his 2 daughters, for he was afraid to stay in Zoar. So he lived in a cave along with his 2 daughters. And the elder said to the younger, Our father grows old, and there is not a man in the country to come to us as others do all the world over. Come on, let us make our father drunk with wine, and cohabit with him, and it may be that we shall have children by our father. So they made their father drunk with wine that night, and the elder went and lay with her father, but he was not aware of the fact when she lay down or rose up. It was some time afterwards that the elder said to the younger, See, I went with my father the other night. Let us make him drunk with wine also tonight,
and you can go and lie with him, and it may be you will have children by your father."
So they made their father drunk also that night with wine. And the younger rose and went with him, and he knew not when she lay down or when she rose up. Thus both of the daughters of Lot conceived from their father. Then the elder gave birth to a son, and she called his name Moab. He was the ancestor of Moab of today. And the younger also gave birth to a son, and she called his name Ben-Ami. He was the ancestor of Ammon of today. Chapter 20. Abraham then removed quietly from there landward, and settled between Kadesh and the wall, and resided in Gerar. And as Abraham said of Sarah his wife, "She is my sister," Abimelech the king of Gerar sent and took Sarah. God, however, came to Abimelech in a dream at night, and said, "Beware of death because of this woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife." But Abimelech had not made advances to her. So he replied, "My lord, would you kill a just person? Has not this man said to me, 'She is my sister'? And did not she herself say to me, 'He is my brother'? In the honesty of my heart and the innocence of my hand I have done this." Then God said to him in a dream, "I also know that in the honesty of your heart you have done this, so I restrained you. I also warned you from sin against me, therefore I did not permit you to approach her. So now return the woman to her husband, for he is a great teacher, and will intercede for you. But if you do not return her, know that you shall certainly die, and all that you have." When Abimelech awoke in the morning, he called his ministers, and related in their hearing the whole of these events, and the men were greatly afraid. Abimelech consequently called Abraham and asked him, "What have you done to us? And what have I sinned against you, that you have brought on me and my kingdom this great danger for acts they have not done? You have done us a wrong." And Abimelech continued to Abraham, "What have you seen, that you have done this thing?" But Abraham replied, "I said that perhaps there is no fear of God in this place, and they will kill me on account of my wife. And indeed she is my sister, the daughter-in-law of my father, but not of my mother, and she was given to me for a wife. But when God caused me to be a wanderer from my father's house, then I said to her, 'This is the kindness which you shall show to me in every place where we come. Say I am your brother.'" Abimelech, however, took sheep, oxen, slaves, and girls, and gave to Abraham, and he returned Sarah his wife to him. And Abimelech said, "See, my country is before you. Stay wherever it is good for your eyes." While to Sarah he said, "I have given 1,000 gifts to this brother of yours, for he must be a covering of the eyes to all who are with you, and to all who meet you." Then Abraham appealed for Abimelech to God, and God made the wives of Abimelech fruitful, and his servants as well, and they gave birth to children, because the ever-living had sterilized those of the household of Abimelech on account of Sarah, the wife of Abraham. Chapter 21. The ever-living afterwards effected with Sarah what he had promised, and the Lord did for Sarah that which he had said. And Sarah conceiving gave birth to a son to Abraham in his old age, in the way that God had promised him. Abraham accordingly gave the son born to him by Sarah the name of Isaac, and Abraham circumcised Isaac on the 8th day, as God had instructed him. And Abraham was then 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah then said, "God has made a delight for me, for he has heard my laugh to him. All who hear will laugh with me." And she continued, "For Abraham I am a flowing brook. He has made me suckle children, for I have borne a son to his age." When the lad grew and was weaned, Abraham celebrated the weaning of Isaac with a great feast. Sarah also saw the son which Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham, playing, and said to Abraham, "Drive out my maid and her son, for the son of this slave shall not be an inheritor with my son Isaac." But in Abraham's view this speech was very bad in regard to his son. But God said to Abraham, "Let it not be disheartening in your sight. Do all that Sarah has said against the lad, and against his mother. Listen to what she says, For from Isaac I will nominate an heir to you, and also from the son of your second wife I will found a great nation, for he is your heir." Abraham accordingly rose up at dawn, and taking bread and a skin of water, he placed them on the shoulder of Hagar and the lads, and sent her away. And she went and wandered in the desert of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was exhausted, however, she placed the lad under a bush, and went and seated herself on the other side. For she said, "I shall not then see the lad's death." So she rested on the other side, and she raised her voice and wept. God then heard the voice of the youth, and a messenger of God called from the sky to Hagar, and said to her, "What, Hagar, is the matter? Be not afraid, for God has heard the voice of the lad, from where he is. Arise, take the lad and support him, for I will make from him a great nation." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a spring of water, and she gave the lad a drink. Thus God gave life to the lad, and he grew, and dwelt in the desert, and became a mighty archer, and settled in the desert of Paran. And she took a wife for him from the land of Egypt. It was about this time that Abimelech and Pichol the commander of his army addressed Abraham, saying, "God is with you in all that you do. So now take an oath to me before God that you may not deceive, and to my children and posterity that the kindness which I have shown to you, you will show to me, and to the land where you have been a foreigner." And Abraham replied, "I will take the oath." Abraham then reproved Abimelech about the affair of the well of water, which the servants of Abimelech had stolen. Then Abimelech answered, "I did not myself know of that matter, and neither did you report it to me, and I never heard it until today." Abraham then took sheep and oxen and gave to Abimelech, and the two entered into a treaty. Abimelech then asked Abraham, "What are these 7 lambs for, which you have put by themselves?" "You take these 7 lambs from my hand," he answered, "that they may be an evidence for me that I dug this well." They accordingly called that place the Well of the Oath, and he entered into a treaty at the Well of the Oath, with both Abimelech and Pichol, the commander of his army. Then they returned to the land of the Philistines. They also planted tamarisk trees by the Well of the Oath, and called there on the name of the ever-living eternal God. So Abraham remained in the land of the Philistines for many days. The end of chapters 15 through 21 of the book of Genesis. Recording by Mark Penfold.